It all began with the dream of a peaceful life in a quiet suburban community, a neighborhood of manicured lawns, pastel-colored homes, and smiling neighbors who waved from their porches. To anyone passing by, Maplewood Estates looked like paradise, but behind its white fences and HOA banners lay something darker, something sinister waiting to strike. Ava had moved there 6 months ago with her husband, Daniel, and their 1-year-old daughter, Lily. They wanted to escape the chaos of city life and raise their child in a safe, clean environment. The house was perfect, large windows that caught the morning sun, a fenced yard for Lily to play in, and a community park just down the street. Everything seemed ideal until she met the HOA president. Her name was Karen Whitmore, a woman in her late 50s with sharp blue eyes that never blinked for long. She had that permanent smirk of superiority, the kind that made you feel judged before you even spoke. Karen ran the HOA like a kingdom, and she was its self-appointed queen. Rules were her commandments: lawn height, mailbox color, garbage bin placement, and even how long a child's toys could stay in the yard. At first, Ava tried to stay polite. She paid her HOA dues on time, kept her lawn trimmed, and even baked cookies for the community picnic. But from the moment Karen laid eyes on baby Lily, her smile froze into something cold, something calculating. She would stare too long, make strange comments about Lily's eyes, her skin tone, and once even asked, "Are you sure she's yours?" Ava laughed it off then, but deep down, something about Karen's tone chilled her. The strange encounters escalated quickly. Karen started inspecting Ava's property without notice, claiming routine compliance checks. One afternoon, Ava found Karen in her backyard, staring through the window at Lily playing with her stuffed bear. When confronted, Karen just smiled and said she was checking for unsafe conditions. Ava told Daniel that night she had a bad feeling, like they were being watched. He brushed it off as paranoia, insisting Karen was just another nosy neighbor. But Ava knew what she saw, the way Karen's eyes followed Lily, the way her phone camera seemed to flash whenever the baby was outside. A week later, Ava received a letter from the HOA. It wasn't a fine, it was a complaint. According to the letter, a neighbor had raised concerns about Lily's parentage and safety. The letter claimed there was a possibility of child neglect and that the HOA had a duty to ensure all children within the community were safe. Ava's hands trembled as she read it. It was absurd, offensive even, but worse than that, it was personal. She stormed to the HOA office, where Karen sat behind her desk with that same smug smile. The entire conversation was laced with veiled threats, Karen hinting at anonymous reports, necessary investigations, and protocols for unfit guardians. When Ava demanded to know who made the complaint, Karen just said, "Sometimes, truth reveals itself through action, not words." After that, Ava noticed cars parked near her house at odd hours. Once she found a note on her door, "You can't hide the truth." She called the police, but they brushed it off as a prank. Her world started to close in, friends in the neighborhood stopped visiting, whispers followed her at the park, and even the HOA newsletter carried subtle digs about responsible parenting. Then one evening, the nightmare became real. Ava had gone inside to grab Lily's bottle just for a minute. When she came back out, the stroller was gone. Panic seized her chest. She screamed Lily's name, her voice echoing through the quiet streets. Neighbors came out, confused and slow to react. Then she saw it, Karen's silver SUV speeding out of the cul-de-sac. Ava chased after it barefoot, her heart pounding harder than it ever had before. She screamed for help, but by the time anyone reacted, the car had vanished into the night. The police arrived half an hour later. They asked questions, took notes, and promised to issue an Amber Alert. But Ava could see it in their eyes, they doubted her. When they asked if she had custody paperwork, she realized Karen had already gotten to them. Someone had told them Ava was Lily's real mother. By midnight, the house was filled with flashing lights, police chatter, and confusion. Daniel returned from work in shock, demanding answers that no one had. The only clue was a voicemail Ava received an hour later from an unknown number. The voice was calm, deliberate, and terrifyingly familiar. "She's safe now," Karen said. "You'll understand soon enough. Real mothers don't lie." Ava dropped the phone, trembling, the world around her shattered. And somewhere out there, her baby, her little Lily, was in the hands of a woman who truly believed she owned the truth. To be continued. Next chapter, the search begins, a town against a mother. Ava's desperate hunt for her daughter turns into a battle against the entire HOA, as Karen manipulates the community and law enforcement to her advantage. But Ava is about to uncover something darker, something that ties Karen's obsession to her own hidden past. The night Lily was taken felt endless. Ava sat on the cold living room floor, clutching her daughter's blanket, its faint baby powder scent now her only connection to the child who had vanished into the dark. Police lights painted the walls red and blue, but their presence brought no comfort. Each passing hour without news felt like a lifetime slipping away. By dawn, the Amber Alert had gone public. Lily's photo was everywhere, on TV, on social media, and flashing on electronic billboards. Yet there was one face missing from every report: Karen Whitmore. No one mentioned her name. No one even seemed to know she existed. When Ava demanded they investigate her, the officers exchanged glances, their tones suddenly shifting from sympathetic to skeptical. According to official records, Karen Whitmore was a respected community leader and pillar of Maplewood Estates. She had already called the police earlier that night, claiming Ava was an unfit mother who had abandoned her baby during a mental breakdown. Her story was airtight. Witnesses, neighbors who once smiled at Ava every morning, confirmed seeing her shouting incoherently in the street. Some even said she had been acting unstable for weeks. The truth had been rewritten before Ava could speak it. Daniel tried to reason with the detectives, but the seed of doubt had already been planted. They wanted proof: birth records, hospital documents, DNA tests. Ava searched through their files, her hands shaking, only to find that the hospital where Lily had been born had no record of her under Ava's name. The files were gone, wiped from the system. It was as if Lily had never existed. That morning, Karen appeared on local news, with crocodile tears and a trembling voice. She told reporters she had rescued a child from neglect. She claimed the baby had been living in unsafe conditions and that she, as HOA president, had intervened until the authorities could determine the truth. The community rallied behind her. Donations poured in. Strangers called her a hero. Ava watched in disbelief as the woman who had stolen her baby became the town's savior. But Ava knew better. She knew Karen's eyes, cold, hungry, possessive. She wasn't acting out of kindness. She was claiming ownership. That afternoon, Ava and Daniel were summoned to the station for questioning. The tone was no longer gentle. The detectives hinted that Ava might be emotionally unstable, asking about medications, therapy, postpartum struggles. Every word was designed to make her doubt herself. When she demanded to press kidnapping charges, the officer leaned forward and said, "We can't file kidnapping charges until we confirm the child legally belongs to you." It was a trap, and Karen had set it perfectly. Days turned into weeks. Every lead went nowhere. Karen's house became untouchable, protected by HOA bylaws, lawyers, and privacy rights. She filed a restraining order against Ava, claiming harassment. When Ava tried to get close, she was threatened with arrest. The neighborhood began to turn hostile. People avoided her. Mothers at the park whispered behind her back. She received anonymous notes telling her to get help and move on. Daniel did what he could, hiring private investigators, contacting the media, but it was Ava who refused to give up. She drove through every street, searching for Karen's silver SUV. She tracked every rumor, every sighting. Some said they saw Karen at a remote cabin outside town. Others claimed she'd taken Lily to a safe home for children of uncertain parentage. None of it led anywhere. But then, one night, something changed. Ava sat alone in her car near the HOA office, staring at the darkened building. A figure moved inside, a flicker of light in Karen's office window. Ava crept closer, heart pounding. Through the glass, she saw Karen sitting at her desk, holding a framed photo. Even from a distance, Ava recognized it instantly. It was Lily. But beside the baby's face was another woman, someone Ava had never seen before. A chill ran through her spine. The woman in the photo looked eerily like Ava, same hair color, same build, but older. Her eyes, though, were empty, lifeless, and on the back of the photo, Karen had scribbled something. Ava couldn't make out the words through the reflection, but she caught the final line: "She will always be mine." That was when Ava realized this wasn't just a case of jealousy or control, it was obsession. Karen didn't believe she had kidnapped someone else's child. She genuinely believed Lily belonged to her. Over the next few days, Ava dug deeper. She discovered that before moving to Maplewood, Karen had lived in another HOA community 2 states away. There she had been accused, though never charged, of interfering with another family's custody case. A baby had gone missing for several days, only to be found abandoned near a church. The case had gone cold, and the family had disappeared soon after. Karen's record remained spotless, her reputation intact. Now Ava knew what she was dealing with, a predator who used the system as her weapon. Desperation gave Ava new strength. She broke into the HOA archives late one night, using a crowbar to pry open the back window. Inside, the office smelled of dust and lies. She searched through file cabinets until she found a folder labeled Community Safety Committee. Inside were copies of letters, reports, and photographs, all targeting her. Every anonymous complaint had come from the same source, Karen. Each document painted Ava as unstable, unfit, even dangerous. But among those papers, Ava found something else, a handwritten note addressed to the county registrar, requesting a correction in birth records for a child named Lillian. Attached was a forged birth certificate listing Karen Whitmore as the mother. Her heart froze. Karen had gone beyond manipulation. She had rewritten reality itself. Ava snapped photos of everything. It wasn't much, but it was a start. She would expose Karen no matter the cost. But as she slipped out the back door, headlights flooded the alley. A car screeched to a stop. Karen stepped out, her expression eerily calm, holding something behind her back. Ava froze, clutching the documents to her chest. Karen didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her smile said it all. The Queen had caught her trespasser. The night air thickened with dread. Then Karen took a single step forward, her voice steady and cold. "You should have stayed quiet." And in that moment, Ava knew the battle for her daughter had only just begun. The night Ava was caught outside the HOA office marked the beginning of her public downfall. Within hours, police arrived, lights flashing across the pristine streets of Maplewood Estates, painting the illusion of law and order over a scene steeped in betrayal. Karen stood in her robe on the sidewalk, voice trembling with well-rehearsed distress, claiming she had discovered Ava breaking into the office to steal confidential HOA documents. Her neighbors, drawn from their homes by the noise, gathered like an audience at a public trial. The woman who had once been seen pushing her baby in a stroller was now branded a criminal, a desperate mother gone mad. Ava tried to explain, to tell them the truth, but every word she spoke twisted against her. Karen clutched her pearl necklace dramatically and murmured to the officers, "She needs help." The phrase cut through the crowd like poison. When Ava was handcuffed, she saw not pity, but relief in their eyes, relief that their perfect neighborhood was being restored. At the station, she was charged with breaking and entering, property damage, and harassment. The documents she had risked everything to retrieve were confiscated as evidence, but never logged into the official file. They vanished the next day, as if they had never existed. Daniel posted bail, his eyes dark and hollow from sleepless nights. He still believed her, but the world around them had been expertly manipulated. The HOA launched a formal notice threatening foreclosure on their home for repeated violations and disruptive behavior. Daniel's employer, having seen the news coverage, placed him on leave pending psychological evaluation. The savings bled away in legal fees and fines, while Karen's version of events spread like wildfire through local media, painting her as the savior of a child trapped in a dangerous home. Days passed, each one heavier than the last. Ava began to notice how the world seemed to move around her in a slow, suffocating rhythm, neighbors whispering when she walked by, mail disappearing from her box, even store clerks avoiding her gaze. Maplewood Estates had become her prison. Its white fences no longer charming but confining. She tried to reach out to advocacy groups, lawyers, and journalists, but none wanted to touch the case. Karen's reputation was spotless, her influence wide. She had friends in law enforcement, in the county clerk's office, even in local media. Every attempt to fight back was blocked before it began. Then, one morning, a brown envelope appeared at Ava's doorstep. There was no return address. Inside was a single flash drive and a note that read, "You're not crazy, she's done this before." A friend, Ava, plugged the drive into her laptop with trembling hands. The screen filled with images and documents, news clippings, police reports, and confidential memos from previous towns. There were names of other families, other mothers, and other missing children. In every case, the pattern was the same. An HOA president or concerned neighbor named Karen Whitmore had intervened, claiming a child was in danger. The accusations always looked legitimate until the families vanished or were driven away by scandal. In one case, a mother had been institutionalized after losing custody. In another, a child had died under unclear circumstances while in protective care. Each report ended abruptly, the details buried or sealed. Ava's heart pounded as she scrolled through the files, and then she saw it, an old photograph from 20 years ago. It showed a young Karen standing outside a hospital, holding a newborn. The caption beneath it read, "Local woman loses child to SIDS, friend comforts grieving mother." The article identified the mother as Margaret Whitmore. Karen wasn't the mother, she was the sister. The child had died when she was in her 30s, and after that, she had joined her first HOA board. The pattern had started soon after. Ava realized the truth. Karen's obsession with other women's children came from a wound that had never healed. She wasn't stealing for power. She was stealing to replace what she had lost, and she believed every stolen child filled that void. But there was more. The files also contained hidden recordings, audio clips of phone calls between Karen and local officials. In them, Karen bragged about cleaning up broken homes and hinted at paying off records clerks to correct birth certificates. One recording even mentioned a man named Garrison, a retired county attorney who had handled her paperwork for years. Ava finally had something real, proof that Karen had been manipulating the system for decades, but exposing her would require careful precision. If she moved too soon, Karen would destroy her completely. Over the following week, Ava began gathering allies quietly. She contacted the sender of the flash drive using an encrypted email provided in the note. The person responded within hours, agreeing to meet. They chose a parking lot outside the city after midnight. When Ava arrived, a man in his 60s stood waiting by a dusty pickup truck. His face was weathered, eyes sharp with guilt. He introduced himself as Robert Garrison. He confessed that he had once worked for Karen, altering records, forging legal documents, and ensuring her victims had no ground to stand on. He said she had something on him, a secret that kept him bound to her for years, until his conscience finally broke. He had kept copies of everything, hidden away for the day he might make things right. He handed Ava a folder filled with notarized statements, signed affidavits, and original documents proving Lily's birth certificate had been forged under Karen's direction. It was irrefutable evidence, if it could survive long enough to reach the right hands. But Robert warned her, Karen would know soon. "She always knows," he said. "You have to move fast." That night, Ava didn't go home. She drove straight to a motel on the outskirts of town, exhausted but determined. Daniel met her there after she sent a single text. "I found proof." They held each other in silence, the weight of hope mixed with dread. At dawn, a knock came at the door. Ava froze. Through the peephole, she saw two police officers. One of them held a warrant. "Mrs. Collins," the officer called out, "you're under investigation for falsifying documents related to a minor." Ava's heart stopped. Karen had struck first again. By the time she was taken back into custody, news had already broken. Mother caught in forgery scheme, HOA president vindicated. Her photos splashed across every screen, her name dragged through every headline. Karen had turned the system against her once more. But as Ava sat in the holding cell that night, she wasn't defeated. Hidden deep in her jacket pocket, she still had a single flash drive, the one Robert had given her, the one Karen didn't know existed. This time, Ava wouldn't rely on the system to save her. She would destroy Karen from the shadows she once ruled. The walls of the county jail were cold and gray, but Ava's mind burned with a fire that could not be contained. The headlines outside painted her as a fraud, a manipulator, an unfit mother trying to reclaim a child who wasn't hers. Yet beneath the noise and lies, she carried a secret weapon, truth, hidden in the form of a small flash drive pressed against her palm like a heartbeat. The system had failed her once, but now she would use it as Karen had used it, coldly, strategically, without mercy. 3 days passed before Ava was released on bond. Daniel had managed to sell his truck and borrow money from a distant relative. He looked exhausted, hollowed out by fear, but when he saw Ava walk out of the courthouse, his eyes held something new, resolve. Together, they vanished from the public eye, retreating into the shadows while the storm above them grew stronger. Karen had made her victory public. The local news ran a feature on her bravery, portraying her as a motherly figure protecting the neighborhood from instability. She smiled through interviews, dressed in soft pastels, her voice dripping with false humility. Every word she spoke was calculated to strengthen her image. She even mentioned Lily, referring to her as the little angel I'm helping raise until her future is safe. The community adored her. Donations poured in for her foundation, and the HOA expanded its influence beyond Maplewood, setting new regulations across nearby districts. She was untouchable, or so she thought. Ava began her quiet war in the shadows. With Robert Garrison's help, she started to build a case that could not be buried. Every forged document, every falsified record, every manipulated police report. They traced them all back to Karen. They discovered that her power didn't come from money, but from blackmail. For years, she had gathered dirt on influential figures, police chiefs, attorneys, realtors, even a state senator. Her HOA empire wasn't just about rules, it was about control. Ava's revenge began not with confrontation, but corrosion. She leaked small, undeniable pieces of information to independent journalists. A copy of an altered deed here, an email from Karen's fake child welfare committee there. Each leak was surgical, each detail crafted to sow suspicion. Within a week, whispers began to spread, first online, then through the same gossip circles that had once condemned Ava. Did you hear Karen lied about that adoption? Someone said she forged documents. I heard she used HOA money to bribe a county clerk. The Queen's castle began to crack, but Karen was sharp. When the first stories appeared, she retaliated by launching a defamation lawsuit against unnamed cyberbullies. She tightened her control over the HOA board, demanding loyalty oaths, threatening expulsion to anyone who questioned her. Her tone shifted from maternal warmth to authoritarian coldness. Still, the cracks widened. One by one, her loyalists began to turn. An HOA treasurer confessed to misusing funds under Karen's orders. A former neighbor came forward with recordings of her rants about perfect families and unfit mothers. The story began to shift. The same local news station that once praised her now hesitated, waiting to see which way the wind would blow. Ava, meanwhile, grew bolder. With Robert's guidance, she traced the missing pieces of Lily's real birth records. It turned out that the hospital administrator who handled Lily's file had abruptly resigned a month after Karen's first complaint. They found her living in another state, fearful and silent. But when Ava showed her the proof of forgery, tears filled the woman's eyes. She agreed to testify. It was the first time in months Ava felt hope flicker, small but alive. Then came the break she never expected. One night, a man appeared outside her motel room. He introduced himself as Officer Lane, the same detective who had arrested her weeks ago. His face was pale, his voice low. He confessed that Karen had approached him years before about helping keep her community safe. She had paid him to file reports, to lose evidence, to create official records that justified her actions. He handed Ava an envelope filled with internal memos and falsified incident logs, each signed and dated. She's untouchable, he said, but this could burn her entire empire. And then he was gone. Ava and Daniel spent the night scanning and backing up every file, sending copies to journalists, lawyers, and online watchdog groups. The digital wildfire began within hours. By morning, Maplewood Estates was in chaos. News vans crowded the streets, cameras flashing against the pristine white fences. Reporters demanded answers. Karen stepped out of her house in her immaculate pastel suit, smiling as always, but the mask began to slip. When questioned about the forged documents, she laughed it off. When pressed about the missing children from her past HOAs, her expression hardened. The public saw it. The facade cracked. Within 48 hours, the county launched a formal investigation. The HOA board was suspended, the community bank accounts frozen. Karen's image, once flawless, was now dripping with suspicion, but Karen was not the type to surrender. That night, her SUV disappeared from the driveway. Her house went dark. When police arrived the next morning with a search warrant, she was gone, along with Lily. Ava's heart shattered all over again. The one thing she had feared most had happened. Karen had vanished into the night with her daughter. But this time, Ava was not helpless. This time, she had the world watching. She released every remaining file, every forged record, every voice recording, every document Robert and Officer Lane had risked their lives to gather. The internet exploded. National news picked it up. Federal agencies stepped in. Karen Whitmore was no longer a respected community leader. She was now a wanted fugitive under investigation for child abduction, identity fraud, and conspiracy. Ava's story was no longer tragedy, it was a movement. The world rallied behind her. Hashtags spread. Lawyers offered their services for free. Strangers sent tips and potential sightings. The truth had finally become her weapon, and she wielded it with precision. Days later, a report came in. Karen's SUV had been spotted near the old cabin property she once owned in the hills 2 counties over. Ava didn't wait for the police. She drove through the night, heart pounding, headlights cutting through the fog. She knew this was where it would end, where all the lies, all the fear, all the stolen years of peace would finally come crashing down. As the cabin appeared through the trees, its windows glowing faintly with candlelight, Ava stepped out into the cold, the sound of the wind carrying her daughter's faint cry from somewhere inside. Her pulse quickened, her breath trembled. This wasn't just a rescue anymore, it was retribution. The road to the cabin was narrow and broken, swallowed by creeping fog and whispering pines. Ava's car moved slowly, its headlights cutting through the mist like desperate hands searching for light. Every turn brought her closer to the place that had haunted her dreams since the night Lily was taken. The old property stood at the edge of the forest, its windows flickering with dim, uneven light. The air was heavy with silence, an unnatural quiet that made the world feel suspended in dread. Ava parked far down the trail, her fingers gripping the steering wheel until her knuckles whitened. She stepped out into the cold. The forest smelled of rain and decay, and each crunch of gravel beneath her shoes echoed louder than it should have. As she approached, she could see movement through the curtain, soft shadows crossing the candlelight. And then she heard it, a faint, unmistakable cry. Lily. Ava's knees weakened. It was the first time she had heard that sound in weeks. Her baby's voice was soft, frightened, and real. It cut through the night like a plea from another world. She moved closer, crouching below the window. Through the fogged glass she saw Karen. The woman was sitting in an armchair, her posture calm, almost regal. Lily sat on her lap, dressed in a white dress, her tiny hands clutching a toy Ava recognized instantly, the stuffed bear she'd lost the night of the kidnapping. Karen's lips moved slowly as she hummed a lullaby. It wasn't soothing, it was chilling, the melody fractured and obsessive. Around the room, photographs hung from twine like trophies, pictures of children, some faded, some recent. At the center of them all, one wall stood out, a shrine. It was covered in photos of Lily, dozens of them, each one labeled with a different name. Grace, Emily, Sophia, Anna. Ava's breath caught in her throat. This wasn't just madness, it was ritual. Karen had been doing this for years, replacing each lost child with a new name, a new lie. And now she had claimed Lily as her final masterpiece. Ava tried the door quietly, it was locked. She moved to the back, her fingers trembling as she found a loose board near the side entrance. She slipped inside silently, her heart pounding so violently she thought it might betray her. The air inside was warm and suffocating, filled with the faint scent of lavender and something metallic beneath it. She crept down the hallway, her eyes adjusting to the flickering candlelight. The walls were covered with drawings, childlike scribbles of smiling faces, mothers and Barbies. But every mother had the same face, Karen's. At the end of the hall, Ava paused outside the main room. She could hear Karen speaking softly now, her tone shifting between motherly tenderness and cold delusion. "You were never meant to be with her," she murmured. "She doesn't understand what you are, but I do, I always have." Lily whimpered. The sound was small, confused. Ava's tears blurred her vision, but her resolve hardened. She stepped into the doorway, the floor creaking beneath her. Karen's head turned sharply, her smile frozen in eerie calmness. For a long, suspended moment, the two women stared at each other, mother and thief, creation and chaos. The candlelight danced between them like a pulse of fate. Karen didn't scream, she didn't panic. She simply tightened her hold on Lily, as if cradling a piece of her own soul. "You shouldn't be here," she said quietly, almost kindly. "She's not yours." Ava's breath trembled, but she took another step forward. Karen rose slowly, still holding Lily. Her eyes glistened with something between pity and madness. "You never understood," she whispered. "She's mine. I was chosen to protect her. You were just a vessel." The words sent a chill through Ava's bones. For a moment she saw something flicker behind Karen's eyes, a deep fracture, the echo of a grief that had long decayed into obsession. And then she saw the truth. On the shrine wall, among the photos of Lily, there was another frame, one older, yellowed with age. It showed Karen standing in front of a hospital decades ago, holding a newborn. The name beneath it read Lillian Whitmore, her child, her original loss. Lily wasn't just a replacement, she was Karen's attempt to rewrite history, to resurrect the baby she had lost long ago. Karen's obsession wasn't random, it was ritualistic rebirth. Ava's heart broke, not out of sympathy, but at the realization of how deeply Karen's madness had rooted itself in her grief. There was no logic left in her, only delusion. Karen's voice lowered to a whisper. "She looks just like her, my Lily, my perfect girl." The words cracked something inside Ava. For months she had lived in fear, powerless, vilified. But now, standing before the woman who had destroyed her life, she felt something awaken, a cold, steady rage. "You took everything from me," she said under her breath. Karen's expression darkened. "No," she replied, "I gave her everything." Ava moved forward fast, instincts taking over. Karen staggered back, clutching Lily tightly as Ava reached for her. The two women collided, their struggle shattering the silence. Candles toppled. The air filled with smoke and the scent of burning wax. Karen's grip was terrifyingly strong, fueled by delusion. She screamed words that barely sounded human, accusations, prayers, memories, all blurring into a storm of madness. In the chaos, Lily began to cry, the sound piercing through both women's fury. It snapped something in Ava, flooding her with clarity. She pushed harder, pulling her daughter from Karen's arms. Karen stumbled back, losing balance. The candle flames caught on the lace curtains, fire blooming across the wall of photographs. Within seconds, the shrine burned, a funeral pyre for decades of obsession. Karen screamed not in pain, but in despair as her illusion turned to ash. No, she's mine, she was always mine. Ava backed away, shielding Lily against her chest, tears streaming down her face. The fire spread fast, swallowing the walls, the memories, the lies. Karen didn't move. She stood in the center of it all, eyes locked on the burning photo of her long-dead child. Ava hesitated for a heartbeat, torn between justice and mercy, but the sound of collapsing beams made the choice for her. She turned and ran, clutching Lily as she burst through the back door into the cold night air. Outside, the flames roared behind her, painting the forest in gold and red. She fell to her knees on the dirt road, holding her daughter close as the cabin burned down to embers. Sirens echoed in the distance. The world that had been silent for so long was now alive with the sound of reckoning. Ava looked down at Lily's face, tear-streaked but alive, breathing, real. She whispered through her sobs, "You're safe now." For the first time in months, the words felt true. Behind her, the cabin collapsed in a roar of sparks and smoke. And though she never turned back, Ava knew the queen of Maplewood Estates was gone, or so she thought. Because when firefighters later searched the wreckage, they found something strange. No body, only ash, melted glass, and one unburned photograph. Karen holding her baby, smiling eternally at the camera. The fire had ended, but the silence afterward felt heavier than ever. By dawn, Maplewood Estates was a battlefield of flashing sirens, scorched earth, and whispered rumors. Neighbors stood behind their fences, clutching coffee mugs, pretending they weren't staring. The HOA's queen was gone, her kingdom reduced to smoke, and yet her shadow still lingered over every street. Ava sat wrapped in a grey blanket on the back of an ambulance. Lily slept against her chest, safe at last. Her face was streaked with soot and tears, her hair singed at the edges, but she didn't care. She had her daughter. That was all that mattered. A detective approached, his shoes crunching over gravel. His name tag read Detective Rourke. He was calm but watchful, the kind of man who'd seen too many broken people trying to piece their stories together. "You said she started the fire?" he asked gently. Ava nodded, her voice hoarse. "It wasn't an accident. She didn't want to let Lily go." Rourke jotted something down in his notebook, then glanced at the flames still smoldering in the distance. "We didn't find a body," he said carefully, "but the place was a total loss. She was inside, she wouldn't have survived that heat." Ava looked down at her hands, burned, trembling. "If," he noticed the word. "You think she's still out there?" Ava hesitated, remembering the way Karen had stood in the fire, unflinching, smiling like she'd been waiting for it. "I don't know," she whispered, "but I can still feel her." 1 week later, the news spread like wildfire. Local HOA president missing after mysterious fire. Talk shows speculated. True crime bloggers descended. The HOA's board tried to hold emergency meetings, but without Karen, the group fractured. Members turned on each other, exposing years of corruption and secret fines. For the first time, Maplewood Estates was leaderless. And for the first time, Ava felt almost free. Almost. She sat in her living room, holding Lily, watching the flames in her fireplace dance gently. It was supposed to be comforting, but lately fire only reminded her of Karen, of the shrine, the photos, the lullaby. Every night she heard it faintly, a whisper on the baby monitor, a lullaby she didn't sing. At first she blamed exhaustion, trauma, the mind replaying what it couldn't understand. But then came the small things, doors closing on their own, the faint smell of lavender, the way Lily's toys sometimes ended up arranged in neat, perfect circles. One morning, Ava found a photo slipped under her front door. It was old, burned at the edges. Karen smiling with a handwritten note beneath it, "You can't protect what isn't yours." Ava's hands shook. The detective brushed it off as a prank, maybe from an obsessed neighbor, but she knew, she felt it. Karen's grip on her world hadn't died with the fire, it had evolved. 2 months later, the investigation concluded that the fire was accidental. The HOA officially dissolved. The land where Karen's cabin once stood was declared off-limits. Unstable ground, they said, but Ava sometimes drove past it anyway. It was nothing but blackened soil now. Yet every time she stopped at the edge, Lily would reach out toward the trees, giggling softly, as if waving at someone only she could see. One afternoon, Ava noticed something new, a small wooden stake, freshly driven into the dirt. Tied to it was a piece of white lace. And beneath it, carved into the wood, a single word, Lily. She tore it out of the ground, heart racing, and drove away without looking back. That night she couldn't sleep. She sat by Lily's crib, whispering softly, trying to calm her shaking hands. And then, through the monitor, she heard it again, Karen's voice, soft and calm, echoing from somewhere inside the house. "Hush now, little Lily, you're home again." Ava ran into the nursery, but the room was empty except for her child, sleeping peacefully. The window, though, was open, curtains fluttering. The faint scent of lavender drifting through. 3 years later, Ava and Lily moved to a new town, far from Maplewood. Life slowly rebuilt itself. Lily grew older, brighter, though sometimes she still hummed that same old lullaby without knowing why. Ava didn't tell her about Karen. She told herself it was over. But one morning, as she was packing boxes in their new home, she opened the attic and found something strange, a sealed envelope, old and yellowed. No return address. Just her name written in elegant cursive. Inside was a photo, Karen, standing in front of a new house, holding Lily's old stuffed bear, and behind her on the porch railing a new sign, Maplewood Estates Phase II coming soon. Ava's hands went cold. Her heartbeat roared in her ears. She dropped the photo and backed away slowly, whispering a prayer she didn't believe in, because somewhere, somehow, Karen was rebuilding, and this time she wasn't coming for just one child. She was coming for everyone's.